Hello, and welcome to Virtual 19. It's great to be here to talk about building academic vocabulary. I have in the room my daughter and educator to be. She's studying elementary education and will be getting her CLD endorsement in the state of Colorado for culturally and linguistically diverse learners. So welcome, Marian. Thank you for being my assistant, because when I get out of this screen and go to my slides, you won't be able to see my gestures and facials, and it makes it hard to do a lot of the demonstration. So my name is Beth Skelton, and I'm a consultant and a presenter, and I am thrilled to be here today, really honored. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. You're gonna see a vortex for a moment, and then we'll be right into the presentation. So here we go, sharing my screen, and great. So Mari, are we in?
We are.
Okay. Mari, can you hear me?
Yes.
And I am not hearing back from anyone. How about if I do this? Present to everyone. Mari, am I in?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to assume that I am and that I just can't hear my daughter for any reason, but we're going to be doing building academic vocabulary with strategies that work. Our objectives today are to really experience and apply these strategies for teaching academic vocabulary. As you'll see in the slide here, this comes from Longwood Preparatory Academy in New York City. They actually charted in a math class for period 1, period 3, and period 6 the number of times that the students were using the academic vocabulary, and they could keep tally of that. So that was one way of doing it. We're going to experience some strategies for actually how to practice the vocab and get those repetitions out that the students so need. I'm going to be referring to several of my favorite works today. Bringing Words to Life, Isabel Beck is a classic. This is the 2002 version, but in Andrea Honigsfeld's recent book, Growing Language and Literacy, she refers to the 2013 version of this book. And so I brought in hers as well. The Teaching Vocabulary to English Language Learners from Michael Graves has a lot of the research that you're going to see, and what research has to say about vocabulary instruction from Alan Farstrups and James Samuels as editors is also cited in my work. So that's more of the research about vocabulary development. The idea for doing an experiment with teachers and having them learn new English vocabulary words through a lot of the strategies, and then at the end of a session taking a test, that comes from Jane Hill and Kathleen Flynn in their book, Classroom Instruction That Works with English Language Learners. So thanks to Jane Hill for that. And then, of course, Marzano and his work on building academic vocabulary does a lot for this as well. So those are some of the references, some of the books that I pulled off my shelf to say, yeah, this influenced this session. And I would encourage you to look into those as well. So why do we have to focus so much on academic vocabulary with our English language learners? Here's just an idea, and many of you know this, but in a typical day, let's take for a middle school student, a 6th grader, they might be running through math where they're having to learn words like probability, fraction, and parallel. And as you know, for each of those words, it's much more than just a simple definition. It is a whole concept behind that word that has to be learned and understood. And then they'll go on to science class and they get exothermic and current and mass, of course, not in the same unit, but certainly over the course of the year. Then we move on to social studies, and it's artifact and orientation or culture, and just words like culture, how deep that word is and what does it really mean. It's not a simple definition, and often not easily taught with one exposure. Then even before lunch, they still have English, and we're in setting and character and theme, and again, looking at that word theme, how many times kids are exposed to that over the course of their years of instruction. And even as an adult, I'm still working on theme. No wonder that at lunchtime, when they finally have a break, they're going to use their first language as they should. There is a very, very heavy academic language load on our students. Then we come back, and thank goodness for our electives, where music, you might only have harmony and quarter rest and refrain. And for those of you who are not music people, you're wondering again now, which is the harmony and the melody, and what's the difference, and what's the difference between a quarter rest and a half rest? So all of that academic language as well. But we end the day with PE, and under Common Core, even PE has a heavy, heavy load of academic language with endurance, isometric exercise, resistance training. It's academic language all day long. And because of that, we really need to be thoughtful about how we're teaching our academic vocabulary and how we're supporting our students in getting it. So if you would take a moment now really quickly, if there's a chat box available to you, to type in some of your favorite strategies for teaching and practicing new vocabulary, that would be great. I've got Mari monitoring the chat box for us. And just let me know some of your favorite strategies for teaching and practicing. All right, well, I'll get back to that in a while, because now we're going to see how many of those strategies you'll notice as we go through this demonstration lesson. Now, we are going to be going into a demo, and the demonstration is a quick story, and I have chosen 4 crazy vocabulary words that are English that I'm hoping you don't know, and I've put them into a story format. But to see where your knowledge is, you're going to do a pre-self-assessment. You're going to rate your knowledge, just hold up your fingers 1, 2, and 3. You have no knowledge of the word, you've heard it and have a general sense, and you know the word and can use it. So go ahead and give your self-assessment now on these 4 words that you're going to hear in the story. The first one is borborygmus, cullet, defenestrate, and hallux. Again, words I chose because I was hopeful that you would not know them, a mix of verbs and nouns, but it could be any kind of word that we're using here. The idea is this, that you're going to get a chance to see how the strategies work for you, and that there may not just be one single strategy. As Andrea Honigsfeld in the keynote said, there is no magic bullet, but a lot of different bullets together, and we'll hopefully get a hit. So here we go into the demonstration. So the little boy in the story that we read yesterday, if you remember, he came home from school and he was so hungry that his stomach was just growling the whole time. He was just growling, and he was so hungry, and he said, "Mom, I have borborygmus and I need a snack." And Mari's going to show you how your hands just work together to kind of grind and growl in your stomach to make that sound, like that growling motion with your hands. And while you're doing that, let's try to say it just like it kind of sounds. We're going to go borborygmus. Let's try it together. Borborygmus. Right. And now if you're in a room with somebody, or just if you're on your own watching this, try this sentence. I have borborygmus when? When does your stomach rumble?
I have borborygmus
when I haven't eaten in a long time. I get borborygmus. So that's the first problem that this little boy had. He came home, he was hungry, but Mom couldn't help him. She said, "I don't have time to get you a snack right now. We have got to sort the cullet to get to the recycling center." And so Mom pulled up the cullet, and you'll see Mari pulling up some of our cullet, and she said, "Please sort all of this cullet and put the cullet in the box, and what's not cullet, just put it in on the side, because we have to get the cullet to the recycling center." So he held up 2 things and he cracked them together and said, "Is it cullet or not cullet?" And he discovered this one is cullet. Put it in the box, and then decided on the next one, cullet or not cullet, and kept working through the whole box of cullet or not cullet. all that glass that they had to get for recycling, he got in one big box. Then, as you remember in the story that we read yesterday, Mom picked up that big box of cullet, and she was walking through the house to get it to the car when all of a sudden, ow! She stubbed her left hallux. Ow! Mom stubbed her left hallux, and as you look at this picture, is Mom's left hallux painted green or blue?
Green.
The left hallux is green. Does her hallux have a ring on it? No, the hallux is the big toe. So if you would take a moment, if you've got something near you and you want to draw a big toe, I can say, nice hallux. You drew a nice hallux there. You could look at your own hallux and say, do you have color on your big toes? Have you painted your big toe hallux nails? So poor little boy, he still has borborygmus. The cullet is all over the floor where Mom dropped it when she stubbed her hallux. And this is not turning into a great afternoon. And you remember in the story, when this happened, the little boy was frustrated, the mother was frustrated, the cullets all over the floor, they're trying to pick up all that broken glass for recycling, and really all Mom wants to do with that is just throw it out the window. She wants to defenestrate it. She's so frustrated. So defenestrate, to out the window it. I'm going to break this word down because it has some great parts to it. The D that's in green, like all of our prefixes, we know D is out, right, or away. So that D, and then fenestre is blue, like all of our other roots. Fenestre, for those of you who know French or Latin or even German, fenestre is window. And so then our 8, as all of our suffixes or our endings, is a verb. So defenestrate, that 8 tells us it's a verb. And we know that defenestrate means throw it out the window. So now you're going to think about something that just makes you so frustrated that you'd like to defenestrate it. Grab that thing in your hands, just imaginary, and look for the window near you. Think of that item and defenestrate it. That was all just pretend, of course. You have sent it through the window, you defenestrated it. Well, thank you so much for remembering and walking through, because, you know, in that story with the boy with the borborygmus, he was so hungry, couldn't eat because had to sort the cullet, and then the cullet fell on the floor when Mom stubbed her hallux, and he just wanted to defenestrate it, and poor thing still has borborygmus. And that's where we're going to pick up our read aloud today. So that's the end of the demonstration. And because you couldn't see me, but hopefully you could see my daughter doing some of the actions and the gestures and having the visuals there on the screen, that you had an idea of how this all worked. And so now I'm going to ask you to think back over that little story with 4 words and think about which strategies did you see modeled. If you're live tweeting during this session, that would be a place that you could list those strategies. That'd be a great place, or you can put them in the chat, whichever way you want to work. But it's any strategies that you noticed that I was using to practice these vocabulary words and teach them. So for the matter of time and moving on and all of that, I'm going to continue to go through. I hope that you caught some of these strategies that I modeled. First of all, there's a context. There was a story or an experience that you had with that vocabulary first. So originally, we would have read the story all the way through, and I would have glossed or given an example of the word as we were reading. But the second read through is really focused on those key words that I decided were most important for the story, for all the reasons that we'll discuss later, like how you choose which words. And those 4 words then became the focus. So First, you're going to provide that context, the story, or some kind of an experience with the vocabulary first. And that experience might be an experiment or a project-based learning unit, but you're using the vocabulary in a context. Very, very important. So sometimes we hear about pre-teaching vocabulary. What I was doing was not pre-teaching it, but teaching it in context. Because if you pre-teach out of context and it's just a list of random words, the students actually have a hard time even applying it when they get to the story itself. So the next was I provided multiple exposures to the term in a variety of contexts. So you may have noticed that each of the words had several different types of strategies attached to them, whether that was a gesture or a visual, or whether it was a sentence frame to practice it. You were doing different things with the terms. And then, of course, the repetition. I kept going back to the story, retelling the story, using the words in the context again. The strategy I also modeled is using a variety of visuals. So hopefully you were able to see the realia, the actual glass, the cullet. There were colored photos. I had a cartoon. I had my own drawing. So all of these types of visuals hit the brain differently. And some students remember different types of visuals differently. So the students can make their own drawing like you may have done for Hallux. I had a drawing of Defenestrate. So there's different ways of showing giving a visual, and they, again, all hit differently. Of course, using gestures or acting out. So the gesture of the borborygmus, like the stomach growling and grumbling, and then acting it out with defenestrate, like actually throwing something through. And then the whole story could be acted out. So having my assistant there could be having the students act out mom carrying the box of cullet and stubbing her toe, so they can see that. It's hard to do in this format, but acting out is a huge boost for the memory on these words and vocabulary. Highlighting cognates and native language connections like I did with defenestrate. So the fenestre is really important as well. And anytime there's a cognate, highlighting that for the students and letting them know that this is very, very similar in multiple languages. Teaching prefixes, suffixes, and root words can expand students' vocabulary tremendously. So even if they don't know the entire word, they'll get close to it if they know a prefix and a root. Or if they have the suffix, they know at least that it's a verb or it's an adjective or it's a past tense. That's a huge clue for them. And then finally, asking lots and lots of questions that use the vocabulary in the question itself. So is this cullet or not cullet? So I'm not actually having the students say the word yet. They're just getting to hear it in lots of questions. When do you have borborygmus? And then in their answer, I gave the sentence frame, which is another strategy I modeled, is the sentence frame. I also modeled onomatopoeia. So I turned the word borborygmus into what it sounds like. And then had we had the chance to be in teams, I would have integrated lots of partner talk. Turn to your partner and tell them when you have borborygmus. Show your partner the drawing of your hallux. Look at your partner's hallux. Does it have paint on it or not? I mean, we would have integrated much more partner talk had we been together in a classroom. So that's a huge piece of practicing the vocabulary in lots of different contexts. And then personalization that didn't come out. So I have borborygmus when. The little boy had it at the end of the school day. When do you have borborygmus? When I smell a hamburger, I get borborygmus. Whatever it is that you're personalizing that you know, I could have had the students draw, what would you find in your cullet? I had a water bottle and a glass jar of jelly, but what would be in your cullet if you were recycling? So again, personalization being another wonderful way to provide multiple exposures and different contexts for the vocabulary that the students are learning. So using all of these strategies rather than just like one magic bullet, it's a multiple of strategies that you want to incorporate, and every word may need different strategies. Not every word needs a gesture. Not every word needs a drawing. but they all need multiple exposures in a variety of contexts. So one of the big questions is, which words do I teach when I can't spend time on all of them? I'd like to end this session with this chart that comes from one of the sources I mentioned at the beginning, and that is from the Farstrup and Samuels, What Research Has to Say About Vocabulary Instruction. I'd like to walk you through this chart and then give a second to process. There are 3 types of vocabulary that they pull out: the content specific, often known as tier 3, the general academic, often known as tier 2, and then literary, which could be a tier 3, tier 2. They just pull it out as a separate. So let's look at those first 2, content tier 3 and general academic tier 2. So there's examples of each of those given. And then what it says, frequency, the number of appearances that that word makes in a million words. And with the internet, pretty easy to figure out, you know, how many words there are, and then how many times do I see meridian? Well, only 3 in a million words. And then dispersion, that last column, means really how many different contexts is that word used in. So the higher the dispersion rate, the more frequently that word is used in the more variety of context, in very diverse contexts. So if you look at landform, you're only going to see that at 0.21 in context around geography or geology. But if you look at conditions at 0.91, you're going to see that word used in every kind of context, from math to science to social studies to language arts, health, all kinds of conditions. So there it is, conditions. With that in mind, what does this tell us about which words we really need to spend a lot of time on? It's pretty clear that those general academic terms, effect, features, conditions, need our focus. And what my concern is, going through classrooms all over the world, is that we don't see the general academic terms being taught directly. In IB schools, they're often called command terms, and these command terms are often taught: describe, compare, contrast. Those terms are often taught, which is great. But I just finished grading all of the IB Language B exams, and one of the terms that the kids had to use to figure out the answer to a question was attribute. It fits right into that category of general academic. And I would say it was one of the most missed questions on the exam, and it was because they didn't understand attribute. Again, one of those general terms that could be used in multiple contexts across the board. So this encouragement to you to really figure out as a team, as a whole school, when and how are we teaching the general academic terms? One of the books that I cited at the beginning, the Marzano's Building Academic Vocabulary, half of that text is about how to divide up these kinds of words and who will teach them and when. So I'd encourage you to look at that and decide as a staff, are we focusing on the general academic terms? I know that science and social studies and math and language arts teachers are doing a great job of focusing on their tier 3 words that are critical, but who's taking charge of the general academic terms? That's the key. Well, all right, we're ready to close with a self-assessment. You get to rate your knowledge now on those 4 words that we spent some time with. Borborygmus, do you remember it? Are you at a 1, a 2, or a 3 at this point? Cullet? How about Defenestrate? And Hallux. Now, I know it was a short period of time and short-term memory. You probably still had those in mind. But this demonstration is really part of a 1 to 2 day workshop that I do on building academic vocabulary. And we will do the demonstration early in the first day and take the test late in the second day. And it is close to 90% of the staff remember all of these terms. I actually teach 5 to 7 rather than just 4 in the story format. And they remember them over the course of 2 days, which is meaning they're moving into long-term memory. My daughter had done this demonstration before, and she said, Mom, I remember all of them because I've done this demo. So it really does matter, the strategies of how we teach the words, and are we moving them into long-term memory? Of course, exposure and repetition are huge with that. I just want to thank you guys for spending part of your day with me. It's been lovely, and I hope that you came away with at least one idea or one new strategy. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and come back and say goodbye to everybody. And thank you all so very, very much for being here. It was an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of Virtuelle for the next hour and a half, and the next follow-up where we're gonna have the panel discussing what you learned. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.